Hello everyone and welcome back. This session we are going to look at casting off. So you've already successfully knit your first piece of work, and we did this, if you followed my last video, in garter stitch, which is this stitch here. So there are lots of different cast-offs as well as cast-ons that you can use for your project, but because this is the same stitch all the way through our work, we're going to use what I would call a standard cast-off. And in order to do that, we need to keep our tension relatively loose. What can happen with your cast off, and sometimes you cast on, is that it ends up being a little bit too tight for the rest of the work. So it's quite important to make sure that the tension isn't too tight when we cast off, because it will pull your work in and skew everything at the edge. So this standard cast off is worked by starting with a knit stitch. So we're going to insert our needle, and we're going to knit this first stitch the same as we would normally if we were starting a new row, and pop that over onto the right hand needle there. And then we're going to do the same for the second one down. And the cast off is performed generally using 2 stitches. So once we've got 2 stitches on our needle here, we take our needle into the bottom stitch and we lift it over the top of the first stitch, and then we have one left. So we then knit the next stitch down as though we would normally, and we have 2 again. So then we have the bottom stitch that we can then lift over the top stitch again. And then we just continue that all the way down until we're finished. So you knit a stitch until you have 2 stitches on your right hand needle. You pop your needle into the top of the stitch at the bottom and lift it up and over the stitch at the top, and again. So we knit the stitch the same as normal, we pop our needle into the top of the bottom stitch, lift it up and over the top stitch, and continue. So you knit, bring the bottom stitch up and over, and then continue. Now if you continue with this to the end of your work, you will start to see this little bit here developing that is no longer attached to the needle. And you don't have to, we will for this purpose, but you don't have to cast off the whole of your work. There will be patterns that you come across that will ask you to cast off some of the stitches in order to create patterns and shapes within your pattern. But for the purposes of this basic tutorial, we are going to just cast off all of our stitches. I think it can be quite liberating to feel your work coming off the needle, because all the time it's attached to its needles, you know it's a work in progress, but then the moment that your work comes to this point where we're going to take it off, it actually becomes something that you've made. And I don't know why, but I just think that's a really nice thing. So you'll get to this point and you'll have 1 stitch left on your needle and nothing to do anything else with on your left needle. So how on earth do we finish our piece of work? And the answer to this one is really simple. So you take your piece of work and pull slightly, take your needle out, and then you'll have this little loop. Now, because this is just a sample, I'm not going to need to leave a very long tail on this, but as I mentioned in one of the previous tutorials, just check your tail length for your cast off the same as you would your cast on, in case the pattern calls for you to use that to stitch this onto something else, or to seam up or something like that. So just check, and if you don't need that for anything, then you can just cut that now. And then what that will do is leave you with a very short tail. I'll just do that now. Forgive me not having my scissors, so this will be a crude craft knife cut. So I'm just going to cut a random amount of yarn and leave that there. And then we're just going to give that a little bit of a pull to make sure it's tight. And there you have your piece of work with a tail from your cast on and a tail from your cast off. And then that really is your finished piece of work. It's no longer on the needles, it's no longer a work in progress, and you have your first piece of work. Hopefully yours is slightly larger than mine and usable, but it really doesn't matter as long as you have the opportunity to be able to continue to knit consistently, and that you can check for holes and tension, and you can improve and make sure that you're counting your stitches along the way. Then really this part of your practice is just about becoming more consistent and getting used to what your stitches look like, and making sure that you practice your tension. So that's the end of that tutorial, and it's probably the quickest one yet. So I hope that you join me in the next one, which will be all about fixing common mistakes, and I hope to see you then. Thank you.